Hello everyone. Today we will see growth of nationalism. Growth of nationalism, how the feeling of nationalism came in Indians. One of the most distinguishing feature of the second half of 19th century was the birth of national awakening in India. It originated from the concept of nationalism and right of self-determination initiated by the French Revolution, the socio-religious reform movement in India, as an offshoot of modernization introduced by the British in India, and as a reaction of Indians to the British colonial policies. So there are not only one reason, there are many reasons because of which this nationalism came in India. Uh, or we can say that nationalism came in Indians. The political awareness generated by these trends gave a birth to various political associations. This trend culminated in the establishment of Indian National Congress in 1885. So, uh, this trend of nationalism, which is coming in Indians, because of this, there was a birth of National Congress in 1885, which marked the formal beginning of the organized national movement in India. And this National Congress, they started the beginning of organized national movement in India. National movement means where the whole country, whole country is rising against Britishers. That is called a national movement. Now let us understand one by one what are the factors which are promoting the growth of nationalism. What is nationalism? So nationalism refers to the feeling of oneness and common consciousness that emerges when the people living in a common territory shares the same historical, political and cultural background, have the same cultural values and considers themselves as one nation. So beautifully they described what is nationalism. So nationalism, what it is, it refers to the feeling of oneness. Okay, so we all feel that we all are one, right? As a nation we are one. So this feeling is nationalism. So it is a feeling of oneness and common consciousness that emerges when the people living in common territory shares the same historical, political and cultural background. So we have same historical, political and cultural background. Therefore, we feel that we are all together, we are all one, and this feeling is called nationalism. So have the same political and cultural background, have the same cultural values and consider themselves as one nation. This is nationalism. Though India had a long historical history going back to many centuries, it was never a one nation and comprised many kingdoms. So, if you see the history of India, okay, so the history is a long history. It is a history of centuries, but you never find that they are all acting as a one nation. It comprised of many kingdoms. So in our India, we find that there are lot of small kingdoms. There were time when the vast portion of the Indian subcontinent came under the rule of one empire. So sometime we have seen that in the period of Chandragupta Maurya, we find that most of the area they come under one empire, but the loyalty of the people was towards a particular king or kingdom. But there also we find that the people are loyal to their king or kingdom. The modern feeling of nationalism was lacking among them. So the feeling which was there today means we are talking about 19th century. The same feeling was not there long before when most of the area is coming under one control. They're they are loyal to their kings only. It emerges during the British rule mainly as the reaction of British rule and the clash of interest of Indian people with those of the Britishers. So this nationalism, this came into picture under British rule only. So before that, never Indians never thought about nationalism. Okay, they never think that ki they are all one. So different kingdom people, they are loyal to that kingdom only. But when Britishers came, and when there are a lot of clashes between Britishers and Indian, then slowly this nationalism concept is came into picture, or it starts coming into the mind of Indians. As we have read in the previous chapter, Indians resisted the British rule from its very beginning. Last chapter we have seen that ki it is not like ki after 100 years they start registering Britishers. In the beginning itself, they started registering Britishers, but they are local. But their representation or resistance was localized and scattered. So some people here and some people there, if they are resisting, then it does not create a much difference. It was undertaken by deposed chieftains, their descendants and relations, zamindars, ex-soldiers and officials of the Indian states. Now in a small group who are resisting this Britishers, so they are deposed chieftains, those who are whose positions are removed by Britishers, their family members, zamindars, ex-soldiers and officials of the Indian states. So, in a small scale, these are the people who are resisting the Britishers. The culmination of a traditional opposition to the British rule came with the first war of independence. So, they all, first time they all come together to fight against Britishers in the first war of independence that we have seen in the last chapter. Before that, in a small groups, they are resisting Britishers here and there, but they all come together, okay, and fight with Britishers, okay, in First World War of Independence. Although it failed to achieve the objective, it inspired the Indians to resist the foreign power and make a determined struggle for the country's freedom. We know that the first war of independence was not successful, okay, but the good point is that it inspired the Indians to resist the foreign power and make a determined struggle for the country's freedom. So from here Indians are determined that ki now they will not sit quiet, they will again fight, okay, and they will free from this British rule. Thus, we can say that the very nature of a foreign rule resulted in nationalistic sentiments rising among the Indians and produced conditions conducive for the rise and growth of the powerful national movement. So, we can say that the reason for this national movement is the nature of foreign rule only. So how Britishers are ruling, that make Indians to feel, okay, that they are one nation and they have to fight together. The second half of the 19th century witnessed the emergence of national political consciousness and a strong feeling of nationalism. There were many factors which contributed to the growth of nationalism in India. These include the following. So let us understand one by one various factors which contributed to the growth of nationalism in India. The first is economic exploitation. There were many factors that aroused opposition to the British rule. Economic exploitation was the most important among them. The Indian realized that the general aim of the British policies in India was to promote their own interest at the cost of welfare of Indians. The economic discontent of different sections of the societies are. So here what we see that Britishers, they are exploiting Indians economically. Exploiting Indians economically, that means what? They are, we can say that money, wealth. They are utilizing wealth of India, okay, to make their people rich, to make Britishers rich, and they are not thinking about any welfare of the Indians. So let us see one by one. The peasants, they were the main victims of the British colonial policies. The government took away a large part of their produce in the form of land revenue and other taxes. These exorbitant taxes led to peasants into the clutches of landlords and moneylenders. So, what they are doing? They are taking taxes and land revenues, and in this form, they are collecting a large part of the produce which these peasants are doing, and therefore these peasants, they are okay, they are, we can say that they are exploited, and they are trapped into the clutches of landlords and moneylenders, because if the major portion of their produce is taken away by government, then they have to take loan from where they will take loan for their survival. So they have to take loans from landlords or moneylenders, and if they are not able to repay, and it is obvious that how they are going to repay, because every year these Britishers, they are taking most of their produce as land revenue and taxes. So they are, we can say that they have to sell their lands to these landlords and so on. So peasants, their condition is very bad during Britishers. Second, artisans and craftsmen. The British economic policies were against the interest of Indian trade and industry. So the policies which Britishers introduced in India, that is against the interest of Indian trade and industry. The English East India Company used its political power to destroy Indian handicraft and industry. So this East India Company, it is utilizing its political power, and it is destroying the Indian handicraft and industry. India became a source of raw material for the industries of the Britain and a market for its finished product. And slowly and slowly, what happened, that India became a supplier of raw material from India to British England, and become a market for their finished product. So finished products, they are now imported from England, and Indians are utilizing it, using it. Now you can understand the difference between it. When you supply raw material, you supply raw material at a very cheap cost, at a very less cost, and when you get the finished product, the cost of finished product is too high. So you are you can make a finished product by yourself, okay, but they made some policies like that you, it is not feasible for you to make the finished product, and then you have to sell raw material. So suppose 100 rupees raw material you sell, and that raw material, when it convert in finished product, so when that raw material return to you in the form of finished product, so 100 rupees raw material, it may cost you 400 or 500. So like this, these artisans and craftsmen, they are exploited in India. The policy crippled the artisans and the craftsmen as they were devoid of their sources of livelihood, and as now they have no work, so it was very difficult to survive. Hmm. The policies of the Britishers, it crippled the sources of livelihood for these craftsmen and artisans. Now let us see how it impacted the working class. The growth of modern industries led to the birth of new social class in India, the working class. They were exploited by the factory owners, who were generally Englishmen. Although they formed a small section of the population, they represented a new social outlook. Their outlook and interest were very broad, covering whole of the India. Though their factories were located in cities, all these factories made their political thinking far more significant than their numerical strength. The educated Indians, the only employment available to the educated Indians was government service, in which competition was high and chances of promotions were bleak. So for Indians, for educated Indians, okay, the only place where they can go and work is the government firms. And here also there is a lot of competition, and chances of promotions are very less. They had hoped that the British capitalism would help to develop Indians or India's productive force as it had done for Britain. Instead, they found that the British policies were keeping Indian economy backward. economically backward. So what these educated Indians thought, that as Britishers done in British, they increased their workforce. The same thing they will do here in India. But what they found, that British policy is keeping Indian economically backward. That means it is exploiting the Indian economy. It is not allowing Indian economy to flourish. Thus, all sections of the society felt that their economic salvation lay in freeing themselves from the British rule. To achieve this objective, the Indian people had to come together on a national platform, and the process, the spirit of nationalism received a powerful stimulus. So, we have seen that how economically the different sections of Indians, the different sections of India, they are suffering in this British rule. So what they all think, that they have to come together and fight against Britishers to come out of this situation, and thus it stimulated the nationalism in the Indians. So this is first we have seen how economic exploitation, we can see, that is responsible for the national movement, okay, for growth of nationalism. Now let us see the nature of British colonial rule over India helped the growth of national sentiment among the Indians. The British had conquered India to promote their own interest, and therefore followed such repressive policies so as to make India subservient to the needs of Britain. These policies became the major barrier to India's economic, social, cultural, intellectual, and political development. Some of these repressive policies, especially those followed by Lord Lytton, Viceroy of India from 1876 to 1880, acted as a catalyst for the growth of nationalist movement in India. Okay, so the policy of Britishers, the repressive colonial policies of the policy of the Britishers, that what they are doing, um, they are their policy is such that they are making Indians a servant, we can say. Okay, they are um, repressing the Indians. The policy is not promoting Indians to do business. They are not promoting Indians to grow, and this policy is again a big reason for development of nationalisms in India. See, this is Lord Lytton. This person is Lord Lytton. He organized a Grand Delhi Darbar in 1877 to proclaim Queen Victoria as the Empress of India. Lakhs of rupees were spent on the event, but nothing was done for Indians who were in the grip of famine. So you can see that this Lord Lytton in 1877 he organized Grand Delhi Darbar. Means we can say that a great great occasion, we can say that a great party, we can say that to proclaim that Victoria is now the Empress of India, and he spent lakhs of rupees in this. At the same time, Indians, they are in the grip of famine. He has not done anything for them. So this again this kind of policy again it create a mindset of nationalism in Indians, that okay, these Britishers, they are not doing anything for us. Next, Lord Lytton introduced the Vernacular Press Act in 1878 and Indian Arms Act in 1878. So Lord Lytton he introduced two laws. One is Vernacular Press Act and one is Indian Arm Act. The Vernacular Press Act forbade vernacular pressers to publish any material that might excite the feeling of dissatisfaction against the British government. Now, with the help of this act, Lord Lytton he tries to suppress this vernacular press. How? Because this vernacular press, they cannot publish anything. Okay, because of which the feeling of people will raise, the feeling of dissatisfaction against the Britishers will raise. This act was not applicable to English newspaper. Now see, they use this act for vernacular papers, but it is not applicable to English newspapers. English newspapers can write anything which they think is correct. In 1882, this act was repealed by Lord Ripon. So in 1882, as this act was not right, it was repealed by, or we can say that many paper organizations, vernacular paper organizations, they are opposing this, and this was repealed by Lord Ripon. The Indian Arm Act of 1878 made it a criminal offence for Indians to carry arms without license. This act was not applicable to Britishers. Again, you can see here, any Indian, if he is having any weapon with him, he is carrying any weapon, then without any license, then he will be considered as criminal. But the same thing is not applicable to British. Thirdly, the maximum age limit for Indian civil service examination was reduced from 21 to 19 years. Thirdly, what they done? They reduce the maximum age limit to give exam for civil services from 21 to 19, and thus making it difficult for Indian to compete for it. The import duties on British textile were removed. It proved harmful for the Indian industries. So here we are seeing that many laws are made which are not in the benefit of Indians, and because of this, Indians think that Britishers are not for them. Sir C.P. Ilbert, the law member of the Viceroy's Council, prepared a bill, popularly known as Ilbert Bill, in 1883. This bill provided for the trial of British or the European persons by Indians. Now in 1883, there was a very good bill by C.P. Ilbert, that allows Indian judges to take the trial of British or European persons. By this act, the British tried to introduce equality between the British and Indian judges. So the aim was to bring the equality between British and Indian judges. This was resented by the British, and they started a defense association to defend their special privileges. Now Britishers, they didn't like this idea that their cases will be fought against in front of the Indian judges. So they reacted. This reaction provoked counter agitation by the educated Indians. Now this reaction was provoked by counter agitation by educated Indians. Educated Indians, what they say, that ki, no, this is correct. Okay, if the Britisher is doing some guilty, then his case can be fought in a court where there is an Indian judge. The government ultimately withdraw this bill. But what happened? Government has withdrawn this bill. The event highlighted the racial attitude of the British in India. So racial attitude, we know that ki, okay, you are Britishers, you are Indians, like that. Okay, there is a distinction because of race. It made it clear to the Indian that the justice and fair play could not be expected when the interest of European community were involved. So now this incident, it created a feeling in Indians that fair justice could not happen if Britishers are involved in some incidents. The next reason for nationalism, growth of nationalism, was socio-religious reform movement. The socio-religious reform movement of the 19th century were great pioneer of Indian nationalism. The impact of Western education, which led to a rational, humanitarian, and scientific approach to life, made the educated Indians realize the need to reform their religion and society. They felt that the path of progress lay in the acceptance of the best of the East and the West. The result was the birth of socio-religious reform movement touching almost every segment of the Indian society. So these Indians were given education, British education, and the educated Indian, they start feeling that there should be a need of reform in our culture, there should be a need of reform in our religion, and we should use the best practices of East and West. And the social sphere, these movements worked for the abolition of caste system, child marriage, dowry system, pradhan parda system, sati and infanticide. The launch of a crusade against social and legal inequalities. In the religious sphere, this reform movement combated religious superstitions, attacked idolatry, polytheism, and hereditary priesthood. These movements fought for individual liberty and social equality. Prominent reform movement were started by Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Swami Dayananda Saraswati, Swami Vivekanand, and Jyotiba Phule. Raja Ram Mohan Rai, let us understand about him. Raja Ram Mohan Rai was one of the greatest social and religious reformer of the 19th century. He wanted to do away with the religious and social evils which were prevalent in Bengal at that time. So there are too many social evils there in Bengal at that time. He wanted to remove all those evils. He was deeply moved by deep lovers of his people and country and worked hard throughout his life for their religious, social, intellectual, and political regenerations. So, people in the Bengal, they are also supporting Raja Ram Mohan Rai in his work. They are understanding that what he is doing, what are the ill religious, we can say that customs we are following, that we need to give up. His approach of religion. Rajaram Mohan Rai was a great humanist who stressed the unity of all religion. So his thinking was that there should be unity in all religion. As a young man, he studied Sanskrit and Hindu philosophy, the Quran, as well as Persian and Arabic literature. He made an intensive study of Western thought and culture. To study the Bible in the original, he learned Greek and Hebrew. So we can see that how many language he is knowing, how many books he read to understand different religions. In 1809, he wrote a prescient gift to Montethist, in which he put forward his views against the beliefs in many gods and for the worship of a single god. He strongly held the view that all the principal ancient texts of Hindus preached monotheism, that is, worship of one god. In 1814, he started the Atmiya Sabha and carried on a persistent struggle against the worship of idols and meaningless religious rituals. In 1828, he founded the Brahmo Sabha, which was later renamed as Brahmo Samaj. The Brahmo Samaj believed in monotheism or worship of one god. It condemned idol worship and laid emphasis on prayer, meditation, charity, morality, and strengthening the bond of unity between men of all religions and creeds. So we understood that Rajaram Mohan Roy, he learned different religion. He understand, he read the text of Gita, he read the text of Quran, he read the text of Bible, and many other things. And from them, what he concluded that there is only one God, and he believed in that, and he started everyone to promote the same thing, that they should also believe in one God. And he for the same cause, he founded Brahmo Samaj. He founded a what we can say that Brahmo Sabha or Brahmo Samaj. He was the founder of it, and here he promoted to worship one God, prayer, meditation, charity, like these things. Now let us understand the social reforms made by him. Raja Ram Mohan Rai was against the rigidity of caste system. He started a campaign for the abolition of sati and parda system. I hope you know what is sati and parda system. In sati system, after the death of husband, wife also kill herself, we can say. He also uh, destroy his own life. And parda system is what? Parda system that women's they generally do not come out in front of the men's with their head and mouth open. They cover their head and mouth with some cloth. We can say sari, what they are wearing. That is called parda system. So Raja Mohan Rai, he discouraged these things. He drive a campaign to abolish the sati and parda system, condemned polygamy, discouraged child marriage, and advocated the right of widows to remarry. So here he also condemned this polygamy. Polygamy means having more than one wife or having more than one husband. He discouraged child marriage. He also discouraged child marriage and advocated the right of widows remarry. And he advocated that ki widows they also have right to remarry. It was because of the effort made by Ram Mohan Rai that William Bentinck, the Governor General of India, he passed a law in 1829 making the practice of sati illegal and punishable by law. He was a strong supporter of women's right. He condemned the subjugation of women. To raise the status of women, he demanded that they be given the right of inheritance and property. So, to raise the standard of women, he also demanded that they should also be given a right of inheritance and property. That means after the death of father, everything goes to the son. But he demanded that not only to the son, but some part of it must go to the daughter also, so that he will also become financially powerful. Ram Mohan Rai was a staunch nationalist. He was pioneer of Indian journalism. He was a staunch nationalist, means he was, um, we can say that pure nationalist and a pioneer of Indian journalism. He brought out a number of journals in Bengali, English, Hindi, and Persian to spread the scientific, literary, and political knowledge among the Indians and raise public opinion on the topic of current interest, and to represent the popular demand and grievances before the British government. He also started a Bengali weekly called the Samvad Kumudi in 1821 and a paper in Persian called Mirat ul Akhbar. So here we have seen that with the help of different journals, he was trying to raise the standard of knowledge, we can say that in Indians, by spreading scientific, literary, and political knowledge. Also, the current interest topic also he is raising the problems of Indians in front of the Britishers with the help of his journals. So, a lot of work he is doing, social reform he is doing. Political rights. Ram Mohan Rai was the initiator of public agitations for demanding political and other rights. So he also initiated the agitation of people for demanding political and other right. He demanded the abolition of East India Company's trading right and heavy export duties on the Indian goods. He also demanded the abolition of British East India Company, their trading right, and the heavy export duties what they are applying on the Indian goods. He also demanded separation of executive and judiciary, trial by jury, judicial equality between Indians and Europeans, and Indianization of the superior services. So he demanded Indianization of superior services. That is, in superior services, Indians should be there. He demanded that executive and judiciary they should be separate, trial by jury, judicial equality. He advocated for judicial equality. That means initially what we have seen that ki Indian judges can hear the cases of Britishers also, like that thing. In other words, Rabindranath Tagore, Raja Ram Mohan Rai inaugurated the modern age in India. He was the father of Indian Renaissance and the prophet of Indian nationalism. So, prophet of Indian nationalism, we can say that he was the one who brought nationalism in India. Nationalism, sense of nationalism in Indians. There are a few more reformers. Let us talk about them in our next class. Thank you for now.